Ladies and gentlemen, we have once again, for your viewing pleasure, Mario Buildreps, Antiquity Reborn. And I know a lot of you enjoyed our last meeting. And well, tonight we're going to dive a little bit deeper into the topic. And first of all, I want to thank everyone that went over to Mario's YouTube channel and subscribed. Did you see a few people over there, Mario? And welcome to the show.
Sure.
Yeah, did you get a little subscriber bump?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you guys got to come over here because Mario has years worth of videos here, and we're actually going to share a little bit of his last video he just put up this week. We'll do that later in the show when it calls for it, and that is the spreading of South America and Africa due to expansion tectonics. And we're also going to get a little bit more into the crustal displacement idea that Mario purports and some of the data he has to back it up. So welcome to the show again, Mario.
Thank you, Diamond. Great to be here.
Perfect. Where should we start? We did make a little bulleted list that you sent over. And let's talk a little bit. Let's just start off with an overview of how you came to the polls, the different poll positions and the methodology. And what I'll do is I will just bring up that awesome GIF that you made with the moving poll positions. Yep. And let's see if we can
go to the website, main page.
Oh, I have it pulled up.
There it is.
I actually have the GIF saved on my computer. So let's just describe to the people how you came up with these poll positions and why does it matter?
Why does it matter? If you look at the Western Hemisphere, so that is North America and South America, 90% of the structures over there are clockwise oriented. And that is peculiar because, let's say, an orientation counterclockwise and clockwise is like a dice. So it can go 45 degrees counterclockwise and 45 degrees clockwise. But they decided to go 90% clockwise, and that's very odd. Similarly, we see something at the Eastern Hemisphere. You see on the GIF. About 2/3 of all ancient structures on the Eastern Hemisphere are counterclockwise oriented, and that's also peculiar. So when you add these two mathematical features together, you get a sort of focal point, and this focal point is on Greenland. And we know the location of our current geographic pole.
Yeah, Mario, let's clear this up. Clockwise relative to what?
Relative to our, yes, it's a good one. Thank you. Clockwise relative to our current geographic North Pole. So this little red dot with its N.
Right. So in layman's terms, there's a bunch of structures in one hemisphere that all seem to point counterclockwise to the current rotational pole, and on the other side, they're all clockwise. Yeah. And so when you start to see that, you're like, what's happening here? They must be all pointing to something moving.
Yeah. And there are a few archaeology papers spent on this topic, and they really delved deep into this topic. Why are the Latin American structures clockwise oriented? Because archaeologists also witnessed this phenomenon, but they couldn't give an explanation for this. So
yeah, and it's about 15 degrees off, or how many degrees off are these structures?
On average, I don't know this exactly, but it's between 15 to 20 degrees clockwise off. Yeah. It's really very much off, not a little bit.
And so it's funny because back in the day, when I was in academia in the 90s, a lot of archaeologists were like, oh, well, they just weren't that accurate. I mean, it's that insane.
Yeah. And of course, this is because when you have a culture and you need to predict time, and you need to predict when to harvest and to sow and so on, you need to know what season you are in. So you need to orient something to the current geographic pole. or to their current geographic pole to know which season you are. And that is why it's important to know your exact orientation.
I find it amazing that you did some videos on Chaco Canyon, which is right nearby where I live. And the reason I live in this area is so that I'm near all these ancient sites. But one of the most fantastic sites is just 15 miles west of here, and it's Chimney Rock. And in the 80s and 90s, they determined that the Anasazi that lived here, which are the Chacoan people, it's the same construction, Chacoan, that they have this particular area set up where they do their religious ceremonies called a kiva. It's the Great Kiva. This giant kiva at Chimney Rock is in a position to witness the lunar standstill at 18.6 years, because from that position, only for 1 week does the moon rise between these two spires. So the Chacoan people knew the exact cycles of all of the celestial objects, specifically in this case, the moon. And people would travel all the way from Chaco Canyon to where I am. It probably took over a week. It's like 240 miles through the desert to come here during this time. Now, I mean, if they knew the 18.6 lunar standstill, then planting cycles were second nature to them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this major lunar standstill in every once in 18.6 years, I believe, is a very specific and difficult phenomenon to witness, because when we look at the moon, we see this very difficult pattern of moving when the sun rises, the moon rises and the moon sets. It's not very easy to predict, let alone the major lunar standstill. It becomes very difficult to predict this phenomenon. And of course, these people were very curious about what kind of universe I am living in. And same as today, what is happening around us? What is this moon doing in our sky, and how does it move? So people like to study their environment, same as we do today. But they had not the means we had. At least we don't believe they had the means. It's always dangerous to claim such things, because we can go into another topic, but not now, of course. And that is what kind of tools they had. And
but the reason I was bringing up the knowledge of these ancients is because if they knew cosmology this exact, they knew of the lunar standstill, then they're certainly not going to make a monument accidentally off 15 degrees from rotational north.
No. This definitely will not happen. And so it has something to do very peculiar with this major lunar standstill, which is something is only recently discovered by science, how this exactly works, this major lunar standstill, this difficult plane in which the moon orbits around the Earth, and how this wobbles around the Earth. It's complicated because the Earth also rotates and has a quite difficult pattern. So it becomes a little bit, even for us today, it becomes a little bit difficult to understand these motions. And let's say I believe in the flat Earth. No, I don't believe in flat Earth, but when I would believe in the flat Earth, it would be because I had troubles to wrap my mind around this difficult globe. And that is why I believe people believe in the flat Earth, because they look outside and they see a flat plane and they think, oh, well, I cannot wrap my mind around this globe and all these difficult motions, and so it must be flat somehow. And even the ancients knew that the Earth was a sphere.
Well, and as we were unraveling cosmology in the early days, it was so difficult to understand things like retrograde motion that we had to add strange nuances like epicycles, where planets are spinning around, because they were incorrect. So it takes time. Knowledge is built by observation. Now, these ancients, the Chacoans, had to be watching the moon every single night for decades and making exact calculations, writing it down.
Yeah.
to even know this, and then to be able to create a giant kiva in the exact position to witness it, and then to tell everyone it's time to come, and everyone knows it's time.
Yeah.
Like, what is the purpose of knowing that?
Just curiosity, knowledge. It has something to do with sacred knowledge. It has something to do with who am I in the universe? What am I doing here as a species? And this is very difficult to explain. Why are people exploring their soul? Why are people exploring their consciousness? Why? It's very difficult to give an exact answer, a short answer to this, because it is all about the meaning of life. And only when I have some answers, who am I as a human being in this universe, only then I start to exploring, maybe is the universe in me, and am I part of this bigger universe? And maybe are other humans the same like me? Or they also have a universe inside. Like, you know, it's about this immense curiosity that people had all over the hundreds of thousands of years. It didn't change. But your horizon, let's say, if you travel along the horizon, you see a ship on the horizon, and it sails away, and you start to sail to the ship. It starts to arise again on the horizon. Why do we tell this? Because it has something to do with, let's say, the technology of people, of humanity, proceeds, and so our borders move. Our horizon gets a little bit further. But this horizon is endless. So curiosity of people has sort of borderless exploration. I don't know what it comes from.
Well, the work that we're doing right here is a continuation of the work of the Chacoan people, the Anasazi.
Sure.
They were doing observational science with celestial objects because that was their universe. And now we have more data, so we just continue the work forward.
Yeah, and I want to say something about this Chaco culture, because I studied this a little bit, and you can see this in one of my videos. The Chaco ruins or buildings are not similar oriented, so it gives a little bit of chaotic pattern. And when I study this chaotic pattern in relation to the 5 poles you see on the GIF, there's a probability that they can match or not can match. You know, there's a relative simple mathematical procedure to describe this. And I discovered that the relation is incredibly high between the orientation and the positions of these 5 poles. So this culture is definitely very ancient, the original culture. But because people still live today and lived 10,000 years ago and 100,000 years ago and 200,000 years ago, they were all the time present in certain areas. So they built upon older foundation and rebuilt and changed structures and rebuilt again, renovated.
Yeah.
So
isn't it?
When you look at Chaco Canyon, you think, oh, this can be old, this can be ancient, because my grandmother, my Chaco grandmother, told about the Hopi Indians that they lived here for 1,000 years ago, and because there were also people around there, and also 100,000 years ago.
I find it amazing that just a few decades ago, we were told that there was no one in North America before 12,000 years ago, which is completely ludicrous, because I know Dennis Stanford, who was the head of the Smithsonian for a while. I even found a Clovis point on the east coast of the United States in a cave, and I sent it to the Smithsonian to have them catalog it. It was Clovis. It's 13.5. It's older than the Younger Dryas event. And he's like, Dennis told me that they have entire sections in the basement filled with Solutrean artifacts from North America. These are 16 and 18,000 years old. And I was like, well, how come nobody knows about them? And he's like, because they're not allowed to know about them yet.
Yeah.
And then in the last decade, we now have papers pushing back occupation in North America to the Solutrean time, 16,000. And then papers even came out in La Brea in California saying that there was human occupation 200,000+ years ago in California. I mean, it's like how quickly the time changes.
Yeah, it's great to see that this is slowly changing, and perhaps it goes sometimes in some periods a little bit faster, but the progress about humanity in North America is very ancient, and that maybe even like the Cahuca Mounds.
Yeah,
Cahuca Mounds are let's say indicate that giant humans lived there. And this is also interesting because I also studied the orientation of the Cahuca Mounds in relation to the poles. And also here we see the correlation is incredibly high, 97% correlation, only 7 mounds and 5 poles. And then I already found a correlation that goes of the chart. And so, and then I think, okay, that's interesting because there are some messages about giant bones found on the Cahuca Mounds. This could indicate that former poles relate to smaller Earth, lower gravity, and so what they call gigantism could be encouraged, or large species could easier live on a smaller Earth with lower gravity. It's a little bit...
Yeah, and then the recent discovery of Homo floresiensis, which are tiny people, put to rest the myths of fairies and elves, because there's actually a species of hominid which is tiny and recently lived in the Indonesian region. And they lived while other hominids were around that didn't know about them. So the idea of Sasquatch and Bigfoot and all that, it isn't really a conspiracy theory. It might be true because we've proven by science that there are other Homo species that are living while we're living and we don't know about them.
Possibly. And because there's also ants on our planet, and they are very tiny, and even lice, or they're even more smaller. So there's a large range of size of species on our planet. But what you see clearly is that large species became extinct in a very logical pattern. The very large species disappeared from the land areas. They slowly seem to have migrated to the sea, to the oceans. I mean, whales and so on. But the large land animals are, you see a pattern there of mammoth, dinosaurs, and all these hundreds of large creatures that they are in between the mammoth and the dinos.
Yeah, and I think that the ecological movement is occurring because of the catastrophe cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also see in science, but also in normal, let's say normal people, is that they have the tendency to cling on to one theory. So I have discovered this, and so this must explain everything there is. But this is not how it works. We have a comet impact on Greenland, destroying the Clovis culture. This is one. And then you have, let's say, comet impact somewhere else that destroyed other parts. Then you have a large volcano eruption that destroys part. Then you have, let's say, a growing Earth that destroys very slowly, wrecks very slowly large species. And so it's very important never to focus on one thing. You must always... This is what I don't want to talk about a lot about spirituality, but it's important to know this gazing. They call this gazing technique. When you, for example, have a large collection of flowers full of bees, you can look at one flower and you see a bee. And then you look at another flower and you see again a bee. But when you can start to gaze at this collection of flowers, you suddenly start to see all these tens of perhaps hundreds of bees flying around this flower collection. And this is also the way you can look at difficult theories, scientific difficult theories. You can focus in on one thing, then your gaze go back and you start to gaze again to the large field of events. Because there are a lot of scientific theories, and almost every theory has a core in it that can be true. But it doesn't mean that the whole theory is by definition true. So what my theory does not explain is the whole history of the Earth.
Yeah.
Because I cannot.
Well, let's first, I like this is a good segue, because when I was studying when I was doing my graduate work, we were looking at the catastrophic cycle in sedimentary rocks. And you can see that about every 26,000 years, there is a major cycle, and it has two parts. It has one environment, and then right above it, a completely different environment. And this pattern repeats. So each 26,000 year cycle has two parts, and we call it a high stand and a low stand, because the environments relate to different sea level depths, extremely deep and then shallow.
Yeah.
And this pattern repeats for hundreds of millions of years. So something is driving this. And then at the time in the 90s, they explained the ice ages were being driven by Milankovitch cycles. And that's the graph that you're using here at the top left. And this comes from the ice core data, the Epica data, the Greenland cores, all the data that they took, all the proxy data, and we have this high resolution graph. It took decades and hundreds of scientists to create these graphs. But what you find when you're looking at them is that the Milankovitch cycles, if you understand them, the mechanics of the celestial mechanics of Milankovitch, there is no way that you will get this type of environmental change that rapidly. And then they came up with the term tipping point. And they said, oh, well, it slowly happens, and then all of a sudden, everything changes. It's complete nonsense. So this is another fairy tale which has gone to the wayside. And almost all scientists who thought Milankovitch had something to do with something think that it may have nothing to do with nothing. It does affect climate over long scales, but it's certainly is not what's causing these vertical rises in temperature and then these mass extinctions. And that's also why I love your idea. So go for it.
But it's only one part of the bigger picture. I never want to dismiss other theories, and that's also important, because people like monotheories, how I call this, and multiple theories are difficult because people want to be right and they don't want to be wrong. So that's why monotheories, I'm 100% right because it's a monotheory. My theory explains everything. And then, but when you have multiple theories, it becomes difficult how much part your theory is part of the bigger picture.
Yeah.
How much am I right? How much am I wrong? You have to sit together. You have to sit together to not to discuss you are wrong and I'm right. No, what do we see? And not to think in trenches, to think in, okay, you are my enemy and I have to convince you and I have to battle you, and this is not how it works. Big theories, big ideas, human progress only wins when you sit together and when you find common ground, and this, my theory, fits in a bigger picture, and I don't know how many percent of the big picture this is. And when the Earth grows, I am convinced that my theory explains almost 70 to 80% of the growing Earth. So it means that the Earth has grown, from my understanding, over 1 million years, and it's a crazy, geologically speaking, a crazy quick time frame. And why do I think this? Because there are a lot of pattern matches between the positions of the poles and the isochron bands, how I like to call them. And these are easy to distinguish in the Atlantic Ocean. But when you go to the Pacific, it suddenly becomes very difficult and it confuses my pattern. And it means that the Pacific is also some other mechanism happening. Not only expansion, there's something else in it.
According to current science, if you go to graduate school as a geologist, and then you learn everything about the isochrons, you can then take a look at Earth and you can reverse it back to one single giant continental Earth if you just reverse the mid-ocean ridges. And that gives you an entire geologic time span of about 180 million at the maximum.
Yep.
Some people, we used to say 220 million was the day the Atlantic began back in university, but now it's around 160 to 180. So that is a very unique time. And in all that time we have, so if you go all the way back then when Earth is much smaller, the Pangea time, that's well before dinosaurs. So this is when the megafauna can exist and flourish.
Yeah.
Now, the problem I have is that on these major mass extinctions that are on your graph, the vertical ups, there is evidence of other cosmogenic things happening. And you just alluded to that. You said that how much of what theory, what percent of each theory all needs to come together in a more homogeneous type of multidisciplinary theory for one answer. And so on these mass extinction spikes, like the Younger Dryas event, 12,900 years ago, we have evidence worldwide of all the North American forests burning, the black mats. And in these black mats, there are nanodiamonds, there are shock quartz and stishovite. There are other types of radionucleotide signatures that only can come from either supernovas, comets, or asteroids. And so how does this fit into the picture? That is my biggest problem. Like, what goes on these shifts where things are raining down on us? Maybe there's cosmic lightning. The Earth is spreading. I mean, it is literally a catastrophe on Earth, which we can see in the graph.
Yes, we feel that the Earth is a very comfortable, safe spaceship. Let's say, but this is not the case. It's a spaceship that once in a while gets very, very, very
perturbed.
How do you call it?
Perturbed.
Perturbed. Sounds very nasty. Yeah. So we live in a time, and we project our safe environment back to the past. So we are now living in a safe, tranquil environment on a calm planet. So we project this back to the past, and this is, of course, it can be true, but I think this is, let's say, a fraction of a percent that this can be true. All the evidence points to a catastrophic Earth on cyclical. So it comes back, then becomes tranquil, then it gets back in chaos and tranquil, chaos, tranquil, chaos. And this is the pattern of expanding Earth and the moving geographic pole. And then you have a comet impact and a cloud of ash around the Earth blocking the sun. This is a short catastrophe. Perhaps this ash cloud stays in the atmosphere for a few years, but it also will destroy some species, and you see this coming back in some layers, of course. But this is a very complicated mechanism. This planet we live on. Yeah, this is beautiful. Beautiful.
That was just a little teaser. That is a megalith from Tonga, and I'm putting together an investigation. You've done a video, I think, on that Tongan megalith. It's called the Trilithon. Now, there is a huge limestone lentil that lays on the top of the Trilithon, which is now leaning a little to the side because of erosion of the limestone.
Yeah.
And if you just look into the literature and get an erosion rate of limestone for that region, you're going to, and the amount that's missing to make the lentil tight, you're going to get an age of around 14 to 17,000 years old. So it was built a long time ago, and they're saying that it was built like 800 years ago. Either it was built out of 17,000-year-old blocks that don't fit together anymore, or they're wrong. Because similar to the work of Robert Schoch in the Sphinx enclosure, where about a decade ago, there was an epiphany when a geologist is standing there and saying, hey, this is weathering that needs to take 10,000 years to happen. And it needs to happen from water. And there hasn't been water here for 8,000 years. So what is going on? The Sphinx is much older than what they're saying.
And so we live on such a complicated planet that it's very important to keep your mind open to this erosion theories that connect to the Tonga stones, and erosion that is connected to the Sphinx, because in my theory the Sphinx cannot be old. The Sphinx as we see today cannot be older than 26,000 years. So that is your time frame you have to date the Sphinx. But I believe that beneath the Sphinx is a foundation that is oriented to another pole.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I've seen some ideas and some suggestive evidence around this. And when I looked at this, it's perfectly fitted to another pole. Pole 2 or pole 3, I don't know, I don't remember anymore exactly which pole, but because it hits directly a pole, I already know this is again a hit. So underneath the Sphinx is another culture. And also one other thing, in your first teaser video, I saw this theory about a geographic pole and somewhere around Alaska, you know? The equator runs through the pyramids of Giza and then runs through some other cardinal-oriented structures. But and this is some people have to think about, because the pyramids of Giza are cardinally oriented to our current pole, and when it would be true that this ancient equator would run also through the pyramids of Giza to another pole, then this shift would coincidentally have made the pyramids of Giza shift exactly to our current geographic pole. This is something perhaps people don't understand, but when you look at pyramids of Giza, I will try to explain this. They are oriented to our current geographic pole exactly.
Yeah.
Let's say
the only way that would make sense is if it was the longitudinal line that your poles are on, and that would go on the other side of the earth right through Giza, and it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. So Giza was built to our current geographic pole. So Giza cannot be older than 26,000 years. But this is for archaeological time frames. This is already an immense time frame you have. So I believe the pyramids of Giza are around 15,000 years old. And
when all the rest of the megalithic structures are being built, like in Peru and etc.
They were hundreds of thousands of years around. And perhaps renovated and rebuilt, or the stones taken away and other stones on top, but its orientation remained the same.
And based on the megalithic building, it's crystal clear that these cultures that are now gone knew about what's coming, and we don't.
Yeah, some cultures definitely knew what was coming, because I said this last time. When you go, for example, to Turkey, you find about 10,000 ancient structures. Literally everywhere you start to dig in Turkey, you find something ancient. And in Turkey also you find Derinkuyu is an underground city for continuous habitation of around 25,000 people underground, with air shafts, water supply, food chambers, and then huge stones. They rolled this on the side to close the entrance. let's say, like a sort of submarine idea to close all kind of gates and to encapsulate yourself in a safe environment under the ground. Of course, they knew what was coming, right? Because you do not build something like this in a few years.
No, definitely not. Yeah. And I believe that there are probably many other areas like there in Kuyu that are being hidden or were buried, because I used to be a caver when I was younger, about 30 years ago in the East Coast, where there's lots of limestone. So there's lots of caves. But what I found was almost 90% of all discovered caves are now covered. They covered them up because of liability issues. People die in them, people get sued. And so if 90% of all the caves ever discovered are covered up, how much of the underground cities are now covered up, sealed up, and forgotten?
Yes, we could guess this, of course. When you find one cave, like this big city, underground city in Turkey,
yeah,
you know almost for sure you will find tens of maybe hundreds of these kinds of underground cities if you would seriously start to search. And maybe there are some underground cities already found, but they were kept away for the public. Yeah, because it's too difficult to explain this. And it's interesting to talk about this, but I don't know how much time we have left.
Well, let's quickly plug all of what do you want people to check out most of your work? What's the most important thing? Is it for them to become a Patreon, or is it for them to subscribe to your channel? How can they help?
Oh, sure. They can very much help by supporting, because I worked on this continuously almost 7 years, so almost for nothing. So every bit of support is helpful. But I find it more important than money to talk about real scientific things that I discovered. And for example, amphitheaters. The Roman amphitheaters. We did some research to this, and this is only available for patrons because you need a patron password. And we discovered that the amphitheaters are oriented to the ancient poles. So this means they are not built by the Romans. The Romans found the foundation of the amphitheaters and just decided to reconstruct parts of it. And they claimed it as, we made this. And this is how it also went with kings that found something in their kingdom, something majestic, ancient, and said, let's maybe brush it up and then say it's mine. This is how it goes with wealthy, let's say, mighty people.
If you go to Egypt and witness some of the hieroglyphs for the first time, you can clearly see that all it was a culture that went there, found a pyramid, and started to chisel on it. Oh, look, I put my name on there. See that? I made that.
It's mine. It's mine. It's for something that people always have done. It's now mine. Let's say gravity is the same. This bridge is mine because the gravity is on it. And this is human nature. And so amphitheater is interesting. So when you become a patron, you get a password, and then you can read all these articles that are for patrons, of course, if you're interested in this. And also, these amphitheaters overwhelmingly orient to pole 6. And this is the most ancient pole that we have discovered, but not really could mathematically prove its existence. And this is, of course, you must mathematically prove this existence, but we were never able to prove this. But this is a sort of very large section, very large area. And this area is too large to become a sort of dense node. And so it's sort of, sort of big node, where this also these amphitheaters are oriented to. So this suggests that these amphitheaters are around 450,000 years old. Wow. And this makes me think about, of course, the Anunnaki coming to Earth. This is around the same period.
Yep.
And start to get some control over the Earth and what is happening on this planet. Let's create some species. Let's play around. And that's also why we humans are genetically engineering all kinds of species like animals and plants, because it's in our species, it's in our DNA to do this.
Fascinating. Now, I believe a lot of the history is so hidden that a lot of these cultures, like the giants, were around until recently, and we recently wiped off the face of the earth many of these cultures. I was doing some research on Jekyll Island in Georgia. Are you familiar with that region?
No.
This is in the United States, southeast, right above
Jekyll Island. Yeah, Jekyll Island.
Right above Florida. There is that's where the Rockefellers and the monetary system was born, and the formation of the Federal Reserve Bank. They built this resort area where they talked about this nefarious stuff a century ago on top of ancient burial grounds, including Rockefeller's house was supposedly built on top of a sacrificial altar. And now, but the tribe that they eliminated from Jekyll Island that lived there were these gigantic people. They were 8 foot tall. They didn't have like Native American features. They looked more Aryan. They looked like more like tall white people. But this has all been hidden. You can go to the island and see some of this information, but it's not in any textbook. It's not taught to students in school. This is one of 150,000 lost tribes in North America. And the reason that they were eliminated and erased is because they had a lot of information that the modern world, the controllers, don't want you to know.
Yes, this is, of course, let's say we now come in what they call conspiracy theories.
Yes.
And this is okay. I'm not afraid to talk about conspiracy, but because Anunnaki and expanding Earth and also it's all also pseudo and conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
But when I have some friends who also believe in this conspiracy theories, but sometimes I think they go a little bit off the borders, because a conspiracy theory can also feed your fear. And when you as a human becomes full of fear, you start to see things everywhere. And because there's also a psychological study done when you know that a thief or let's say a child trafficker is picking up children in a white bus, you start to see white buses everywhere, you know. So fear feeds you is in your primitive brain, and when your primitive brain starts to take over, your let's say your cognitive abilities shrink a little bit. So you need to be aware of this, that conspiracy theories feed your fear, that other people are controlling your life, and that is very anxious. And so be calm about this, because when you know what you are, this is, I'm not preaching about Jesus, but when you know what you are, then you must know that God is inside you. You are a God in the making, let's say. And this is what the ancient Druids and the ancient priests also knew, that you have, let's say, a core inside that is yours. And you can always return to this core and not to the fear that conspiracies are taking you over and so on. So be calm about this. And then I want to talk about something else. What is interesting to look at for the viewers, the listeners, is orientations around ancient structures. And this is very interesting. You see this everywhere around the world, that structures, agricultural plots are almost everywhere oriented in the same direction as the ancient structure. So roads, plots, buildings. Let's say in the circumference of this ancient structure, the whole area is oriented to a certain pole. And I've written a short article about this on the website, and you have to, of course, dig in. Don't know exactly the link out of my head.
So what you're saying is that if you look at, you start with the major temple or structure or pyramid.
Yeah.
And then you go away from that. There are hundreds of other corroborating orientations like roads, fields, and canals even, that all point at the same pole position of the structure.
Yeah. And what this means exactly is that ancient structures, let's say, dictate the orientation of newer structures. And this is not in a micro way, but this is on a macro scale. So let's say it sort of pushes the orientations of newer structures in a certain direction, and not all structures, but let's say the majority of structures. It pushes. When you, for example, look at Europe, you'll see a pattern of cities and roads, and also ancient Roman roads are oriented to ancient poles. And so there's a certain direction where these orientations are pushed to. And it's a real macro thought. You have to look at this on a grand scale, how slow building processes work. For why build a new road? There's an old road here, so let's pave on this old road. So this is how slow processes upon layers work. And this does not count for 100% of all structures. It just counts for a part of, and this part is the majority, and is always interesting.
Well, if you look at all old roads here in North America, are the major highways mimic the original trails, the Santa Fe Trail, all the original trails. And the Santa Fe Trail wasn't created by white men. It was created by the natives that were going from east to west. So there are, like, Wolf Creek Pass here and Elwood Pass. That's the only way to get across the Continental Divide. So everyone would have to have been going over there. So, I mean, you could say you're the first person over this that made this trail, but you're probably lying to yourself because of the antiquity of humanity.
Yeah, exactly. And the Hopi Indians knew this, because the Hopi say you have to walk carefully on the earth because you're walking on your forebears, on your ancient ancestors.
Wow, beautifully put.
Beautifully. And then I want to talk about something else, about soft tissue found in dinosaur bones.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And this is a very controversial topic in science, because soft tissue cannot survive 66 million years of antiquity. That is impossible. And science has turned itself into many turns to explain this. And they explain this away by trying to say there was a lot of iron in the blood of the dino, especially the T-Rex. And this overkill of iron could explain that the tissue never, let's say, dehydrated, or no, this is the wrong word. Decayed. Yeah. So, and what you see when you start to Google on soft tissue dinosaur bones, you find a lot of creationists jumping on this topic.
Yeah.
Because creationism loves to hang on, to cling on this 6,000 year old Earth. And so the soft tissue of bones is into their alley. But what is interesting is soft tissue of dinosaur bones. Yes, I think it's difficult to explain 66 million years old. But it could survive a few 100,000 years with this scientific theory of overkill of iron in the blood. So here you see a certain merge of science and let's say my theory that the expansion of the Earth is pretty young, and that this I believe Mary Wright, no, I don't know. the scientist who explained this soft tissue issue in a scientific way, she came with this theory, and when we can merge this together and say, okay, this could explain that dinosaurs were not as old as we think, because the age of dinosaurs is connected to the geological timeframes. And when the geological timeframes are wrong, your dinosaur dates are also wrong.
Now, the paleontology involved with the soft tissue is they're very small amounts. So it's not, this is one of the bones, the 75 million year old dinosaur bone where they found the soft tissue. Yeah. So it's not the whole bone that's still bone, but within the bone, there are single fibers within the bone that are not fossilized. And that means that you could extract potentially fragments of DNA. Now, I could see this happening if it was completely encased or silicified during the fossilization process. You know, there was one little area that didn't crystallize. I could see that, and potentially being several million years old, even millions of years old. So it's not like a whole bone they found. Whereas up in the Arctic regions, in Siberia, there are some islands where they're literally washing away this mud debris, and there are full animals that haven't decomposed that are 12,900 years old. Yeah. That is amazing. I mean, if we have 12,900-year-old animals that have meat on them you can still eat, cook and eat, then there can be bone that is hundreds of thousands or even millions of years old, I think.
Yeah, sure. It's good that you mentioned these millions of years old, because my theory has, of course, some difficulties with in relation to the expanding Earth. There are issues, and this must be said because there is no theory that is 100% covering everything. It's impossible.
Right, and the whole idea of mass extinction is not necessarily true. And let me elaborate on that. It was long thought that after the Younger Dryas event that mammoths went extinct, until they found mammoths that were 9,800 years old. And then they found mammoths that were 8,400 years old. And then recently on an island in Siberia, they found mammoths that were there 5,400 years ago. So mammoths made it 7,000 years after the mass extinction of them. So we don't know everything, and that is very clear.
Yeah. It's difficult, and this is why you always have to think in this sort of gazing theory. You must cover more areas, not only gaze at one point and then so you say, oh, this is it. So this is sort of human nature. It's something egoic, I think, that you want to focus and that you want to explain, and it's mine, and I know everything for sure, and you're wrong, and I'm the winner, you're the loser. And so people like to think in this, and you must debate about things. So this mammoth surviving the catastrophe of the Younger Dryas is an example. There must be another mechanism that caused this extinction of the mammoth. What mechanism was this? That's a good question. I don't know. Well, and this is also a scientist must learn to say, I don't know.
Right, and these are what we call in evolutionary science exaptations, where you have a unique. So in this case, there were mammoths that were isolated up in these Siberian islands after the rest of them died on the rest of the continents. So there was some issue on the other continents that wasn't an issue on these islands. And while the rest of the megafauna died, this group lived, and they lived for thousands of years after their extinction. And had we been around 5,400 years ago and gone up there, we could have brought some on a ship somewhere and bred them. And there could be mammoths walking all over still today, because environmentally, not a lot has changed in 5,400 years.
Yeah, perhaps, but I see the African elephant already a little bit struggling with its size, and perhaps a mammoth would have difficulties with its bones and with
no, because the mammoths that lived 5,400 years ago were much smaller than a woolly mammoth. Yeah, they had been shrinking, so they were probably elephant size. Yeah,
it's great that you mentioned this. And then, of course, the depiction of dinos and the figurines of dinosaurs. They are made by humans. So, and this is, of course, also explained away as pseudo things, because dinosaurs died 66 million years ago. So then there were no people around. So these figurines cannot be real, or these cave paintings cannot be real.
Right.
Yeah, right. This is a problem, of course.
Yeah. Well, chickens are real, and a lot of people don't believe that chickens are direct descendants of dinosaurs, but there's several papers that come out that prove that fact, that a chicken is nothing more than a tiny feathered dinosaur. Exactly. And we have a chicken farm here. And if you watch how chickens will work as a team and gang up and kill I mean, they are amazing predators.
Yeah.
Even though they're tiny.
They also found feathers on these velociraptors.
Yes.
Yeah. So I just a few days saw a movie of Velociraptor. You know, this animation movies. They can make dinosaurs walk. So it's great. It's great technique, but it also can delude yourself a little bit. But I saw this this artist rendering of Velociraptor in feathers, and it looked a little bit, say, clumsy, because we learned to look at these Jurassic movies with this smooth-skinned, nasty Velociraptor, not in feathers, but this one is walking around with clumsy little feathers, nasty beast.
Still eat your head off.
Yeah, chops your head off.
Well, Mario, we've gone about an hour. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Let us marinate on these discussions. If you could please help Mario go over and support his YouTube channel. The links will be below. If you have a couple dollars, become a Patreon, because he's been doing this work for 7 years. And nobody's paying him. In fact, I'm sure he has a lot of heartbreak because of the lack of money. But the point here is to get the science across. And we really enjoy speaking with you. It's always a pleasure. And some final words. Yeah.
It was a pleasure speaking with you, Diamond, and it was a pleasure to speak to you all on this YouTube channel of Diamond. Great channel, and I also encourage you to support Diamond in his work.
Well, we appreciate that, Mario. I can't wait till we talk next. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.